What's down, people, and welcome back to another episode of Ghetto Gospel. So where we left off at. Last week, we talked about Israel blessing some of his sons that don't normally get talked about too much. Zebulon gonna live by the ocean and be around ships. Issachar gonna be strong, but he eventually gonna bow down and be a slave. Dan gonna be a judge and a weapon for his people, but he probably gonna be a little snaky with it. Gad gonna get raided, but then he gonna raid the raiders. Asher gonna eat good, and something about Naphtali gonna be pretty. Possibly his kids, but more likely it's gonna be his words. And now we caught up. If you actually been watching this series for the last couple of weeks, you probably feel like, wrap it up, B. So we gonna finally finish out the blessings that Israel is throwing at his sons. And I had to save Joseph for this week. If you remember episode 63, you know that Joseph is Israel's favorite son. So you could probably guess he got a lot to say about it. Well, here we go with Joseph, the favorite son. If you wasn't sure, Israel gonna make sure we know that. All the stuff this man had to say about Joseph is the main reason I had to break the last episode up into two. I will say that man did the right thing and gave Judah the birthright because he was the oldest son that ain't screw up and make the family look bad. But Joseph got the biggest blessing. I'm gonna do my best to keep it short because Israel got a lot to say about Joseph. He said that he gonna be fruitful. The way the original word is put together, it's essentially just saying that he gonna have buku kids. And in the next piece, it was kind of rough trying to suss out what Israel was saying, but it sounded like he just saying that Joseph had them looks and women was coming out the woodwork for him. That might be a callback to what happened with Homeboy's wife when he first got to Egypt. The next thing it say about Joseph is that some archers attacked him and shot at him, but he kept his bow steady, and the rock of Israel, that's God, kept his arm steady. And at first I thought this was talking about how his brothers sold him to be a slave, but the word they use for archers is the same word that get used later on in the book for one of the false gods that some of their enemies worship. But the way it's translated right here make it seem like it's talking about the folks that owned him when he was a slave in Egypt. So next he tells Joseph that by the God who blessed him with blessings from heaven and from the sea and from the breast. I'll explain that in a second. He done been blessed better than all his ancestors. And then he said that them same blessings gonna be on Joseph's head and on the head of the one who stand out from all the rest of his brothers, which sound like he was just talking about Joseph again, and that might be what he meant, but I don't think that's what God had in mind when he inspired Israel to say that line. Now that part about blessings from heaven and from the sea and from the breast is kind of like saying from the sky and from the sea and from the land. Blessings of the breast was basically like saying milk, something you had to get off the land. On to the last brother. So Benjamin, the last brother, he the youngest. We ain't heard too much about him up until now, except for the fact that Israel ain't gonna let him go because he thought something might happen to him. Also, you gotta imagine the fact that all of his brothers was way older than him. So he had a bunch of older brothers who was probably trying to compensate for the fact that they was guilty about what they did to Joseph and arguably an overprotective father. That overprotection was probably justified based upon what happened to his older brother. I done met kids who done grew up in them kind of situations. A lot of times they got a chip on their shoulder. I'm guessing that was the case with Benjamin, but it don't necessarily say that, so what it do say is that Benjamin had that dog in him. Technically, it say that Benjamin awoke. And then it essentially say that he devoured prey in the morning and split it up in the evening. Which, when you look at what the words mean in Hebrew, it sound like Benjamin got a temper. And he don't play when it come to getting his, day or night. So that's it for the brothers. And the next sentence say that these brothers is the 12 tribes of Israel. And that everything you just heard is what they daddy said to them. And he gave each one of them a blessing that fit them. So the last thing that happened in the chapter is that Israel tell his sons, "My sons, I'm about to be gathered to my ancestors." "What you talking about, Pops? Seriously, bro? Boy, I'm about to die. Bury me with my ancestors in the cave of Ephron the Hittite." And then he tell them what a cave is, that it's in the land of Canaan, and that their great-grandpa Abraham bought it to be burial property, which either mean that his sons ain't seen it in a long time, if at all, or he just doing some old man rambling at this point. My guess is that they either don't know or don't remember what a cave is. Then he say, "Abraham and his wife Sarah buried there, Isaac and Rebekah buried there, and I buried Leah there too. That field and that cave that's in it was bought from the Hittites." And it say that after Jacob finished giving his last commands, he pulled his feet up into his bed, breathed his last breath, and went to go be with his ancestors. So that's it for this week. If you don't know Jesus, but you're trying to get to know him, go and click that first link in the description down there. I'll see y'all next week, and as always, peace, and I hope y'all people straight.